Okay, Joe and I had a conversation yesterday at the end of class. Again, we've had this conversation several times over the past 2 years about some of you desiring to not to transform business in a country necessarily, but to go in and get a church started in places where there are not Christians or not many Christians. Okay, so I spent the rest of yesterday thinking about this. If you ask me the question, can we go into a country for the express purpose of evangelism and church planting as a business person who also starts a business? The answer is absolutely yes. Have I now understood the question? The danger is you will either be a bad business or a bad evangelist. It would be better if you were not bad at either. If your primary objective is to get people saved and a church planted, and you don't run a very good business, or you run a confusing business like ACTCO, the danger is limited. You certainly have built eternity and employed a few people for a while. In the time we are in the development of the church, which is a time of focusing on the professions as well as continuing in evangelism and in church planting, a movement of bad businesses would be a tragedy. Okay, let me give you an example. When the missionaries went in the second wave of missions into one area in Asia, they all lived in walled compounds because of the danger to their personal lives. And their daily routine was they would get up in the morning and they'd have their breakfast, and then they'd all gather to study the Bible. They'd study the Bible throughout the morning, have their lunch, and then they'd go out and do their evangelistic work or their discipleship work. And as people became Christians, they brought them in to the compound to join them for the morning Bible studies. As they developed, and finally after they left, Christians left their employment because the way you worshiped God was you got up in the morning and studied the Bible until lunchtime. So what they modeled is what the people did. Are you with me? Now, they knew that that wasn't the way ordinary Christians, the missionaries knew that wasn't the way ordinary Christians should live. That's the way missionaries live. It's fine for a missionary to spend their morning in prayer and the study of the Bible. It's not fine for a business person to do that, unless they work the night shift. Okay, so the danger with the twofold purpose is not that you can't do one or the other. The danger is what you will model either as church or as business. Okay, but the fact is we change hats, as I said yesterday, all the time. So you have no trouble thinking about the difference between your relationship as a parent to an adult child and how it differs as a parent, as a boss to an employee or a co-worker with a co-employee. But you do know that family businesses are notoriously horrendous. So otherwise, when dad is dad and dad owns the company, now you have a dynamic that is really difficult. And I have a friend who meets almost exclusively with Christian businesses that are basically family run, and very big companies in the world are like that. And they need constant help to separate the two objectives, loving their families and working with them. Okay, now it would be easier for you to see that danger if that's what you were doing, business with your family. But you are doing something every bit as profound when you mix an evangelistic motive and a business motive. You can do both, but you have to be careful. Why? Because you hold the money. You're the key to them being able to eat and provide for their families. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of power when all you're doing is business. Now, when you become also the only church in the community and the best employer in the community, you have a lot of pressure on people to become Christians so they can get a job. Okay, so I know of one situation in Nepal where that was exactly it. Their business was very successful, and they were the best employment in this city. But they were also the only church. So when people have to begin to go, do I want to convert or do I want a lousy job? If I convert and get a great job, you now there's confusion in their minds because you got buy and sell attached to give and receive. And we have done this in the past. This is called rice Christians in China. And there was a whole movement where, of course, the church grew exponentially because if you became a Christian, you could eat. But now these are not real conversions. And even when Billy Graham goes in with a campus with a crusade, only 12% of those people that respond follow through as Christians. And that's just straight evangelism with no other encumbrance. Okay, so a lot of those people that walked up at that crusade were responding to some other stimulus at the moment, but it wasn't a heart change. Well, but 12% were. That's okay. How exciting. Because 12% of 1,000 people coming forward is 120 people. Not to be sneezed at. But when you add another motive to your relationship to them, to listen to you, so it's not Billy Graham and they had to get up and get in their car and travel to a coliseum and wait a few hours to sit down and then say, okay, I'm here, I'm going to listen, and they responded. In your relationship, they're just going to work, and they have to go to work because they need to eat. Are you with me? You just have to be careful. Because your zeal for God on the evangelistic side will override your wisdom of God on the business side. Can you do it? Yes. My advice is you don't bring closure to coming to Christ in the workplace. Because if it's really Christ, He will still be moving on their heart an hour after work stops. If they have to come to Christ right now, I sincerely doubt that it's the Holy Spirit. It's something else going on. So you meet for tea, or you meet at their home. You meet at a place where your power is not so obvious. My advice is that you don't have required Bible studies. That you don't do Bible studies when it leaves all the non-Christians awkwardly sitting at their desks looking terribly non-Christian. I mean, why would you want to do that to somebody? Are you trying to embarrass them into the kingdom? It won't work that way. So if Christians are keen for a Bible study, they'll come an hour earlier. And if they don't come an hour earlier, it's because they weren't keen for the Bible study anyway. Or do it over lunch. Anytime when it doesn't become apparent that you have a two-tier system. Celebrate their freedom of religion. If they're Muslim, give them a place to pray and time to do so. Consider their holidays as well as our holidays. Now, if your goal is primary evangelism and you're there because you are a business person, and there's nothing wrong with that, you don't have to worry so much about the economic development of the nation. Now, the passion of transformation is nation building. Nation building is primarily not evangelism. Okay? Because if nation building were evangelism, Africa would be built because they're evangelized. So I think one of the problems I have with your language, which may be my problem, is you keep wrapping in business as missions. And I'm not sure what to do with that sentence. We talked about that yesterday. But also the idea of transformation, which when we sift down, it appears to me in conversation, what you're really saying you want to do is you want to do evangelism and church planning and, as a business person. Okay, so then the transformation language becomes confusing, you see, because transformation will require a shift of values in the entire world of business within that culture. Now, there's nothing wrong with that not being what you're there to do. But then don't call it transformation. Call it church planning, and call it what you like, but don't call it transformation. You're really there church planning and evangelizing, and your best vehicle for connecting with the people is work. No problem. You don't have to add upon yourself, what was, did we lose Matt? Ah, there he is. Well, you said the other day, there are specific good examples where they've mixed the two. And there are specific good examples where they've mixed the two. And they are almost all people who knew they were primarily going to evangelize. And did it with a business. But they're not there to transform the thinking of the nation to a biblical standard of economics. Okay, so yesterday I'm going, whoa, I'm giving these guys way too big a picture for what I think they're saying they want to do. But that's because you talk about transformation. See, that's all I teach on, is getting back to the biblical values for reformation. I don't teach on church planting and evangelism. Okay? So either I'm not scratching you where you itch, or the Holy Spirit wants to give you a higher expectation for what your businesses accomplish in addition to doing evangelism and church planting. You think that's it right there? okay? In which case I don't feel so bad, like I've wasted 5 of your days. Because there is no reason why you can't be a business that is a model to change the nation economically and do your evangelism and church planning on the side. There's no reason why you can't model all of the values of the kingdom in your business, but you don't do it with words. You don't quote scripture. See, when Jesus goes out into the public, he tells parables. When he goes into the synagogue, he uses scriptures. Okay, so one of his parables is, there's this man. He's walking through a field. And it's an empty field, and he finds a pearl, a very valuable pearl. I don't know about finders keepers, but he clearly knew it wasn't his. See, there's a value. Private ownership. He clearly understood, even though he saw this pearl in a field, that field belonged to somebody. And that pearl, therefore, belonged to whoever owned that field. Now, you never noticed that in that parable before because you're so quick to get to the salvation motive at the end. See, but Jesus is reinforcing everything you walk by does not belong to you. Because it was left out on the table does not mean me computer a su computer. So he goes and sells everything he owns. Wow. He owns stuff. Private property. It's his to do with. You know, in most of the developing world, they go, why would he get rid of everything he owns? Oh no, now, because it's always today, now. Now he doesn't have anything. Forward planning. He goes out and buys the field. Private property. Contractual business. I don't care if they signed a contract or they did, but now it is his. It has transferred ownership. And the community knows it. So when he lifts up this pearl of great price and goes, the guy can't take the land back. He's shrewd, for heaven's sakes. And Jesus does tend to honor shrewdness. And now the pearl is his. So he has more than what he gave up. Now, if you can't instill that value in people for material goods, if you can't explain the wisdom of that in a business context, how do you expect them to get the abstraction of you give up your life to Jesus and you get back what you never could have had before? You see, the business example is far simpler to grapple with than its application to the unseen world. And that's why everything God teaches is in the seen world. Okay, so every parable starts here and now. And then Jesus extrapolates and says, you see, this is the way my Father's kingdom is. So if your business model is off, your salvation model will be off. Jesus says there's a guy walking along, and there's an ox in the ditch, and it's the Sabbath. It's just so stinking not religious. And so what should he do? Well, every Jew knows an ox is a valuable animal. That's a lot of money sitting in that debt. She needs to help the ox get out. Now, is it not just as important, if more important, that I heal on the Sabbath? You see, if you don't understand the value of the ox, the material world still doesn't make sense to you. How are you going to understand your value? So being a good business model will actually enhance their understanding of the kingdom, but not if you make business religious. Are you with me? Okay, Joe, shall we do Q&A? Do you want to draw more out or mark more out, or I want to custom fit this to where we are this morning? I can keep talking and talking, but I think I actually said what I needed to start with.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I'm going to let somebody else do the mic, though. I can't chew gum and walk at the same time. Yeah, just one thing at a time. I never know where my body is, see, because I'm living in my head. So yeah. If I move and think, I'm a danger.
I'm glad when you, is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad when you started this morning and there was a sign of relief.
Yes, sir.
When
deeply.
Yeah, because that would have, wow, I would have had more gray hair. But I agree really with what you're saying. I mean, honestly, I'll be sharing more of my testimony next week. And everything you're saying, we're wrestling with the last 15 years. And I think the reality is, until those of you and myself who are doing it, what you shared won't make as sense more powerfully. I do want to just say, as I've wrestled with business as mission, business for transformation, all these terms, which are absolutely confusing everyone, I really believe if we hear the wisdom and learn from others' experiences and our own mistakes, please, I know we make enough,
Yeah.
that you really truly can integrate the
Yes.
both. I know it. I'm doing it.
Yes.
Now, am I doing it well? Maybe some days not. But I just want to say out there, we have to do it well because of all these concerns you mentioned. We have to. If we don't, it's going to create all these negative repercussions. So yes, I'm all about we have to do it well. And when I started 15 years ago, none of this discussion was here because it wasn't here. I mean, Tim was even before us. And I'm grateful that now in the BAM transformation, kingdom, business, whatever movement,
Whatever it is.
that we are now having these discussions for people who are just beginning to do it or have been in it and need to kind of refocus, because if we don't do these things in terms of wrestle with it, because the movement is really picking up in the last few years.
Yes, it is.
There could be trouble. So I just want to say publicly, I hear you, but I really believe in my heart, and that's what my whole life is about. I'm still doing BAM. Even though I'm going around the world and I'm coaching and mentoring now, I don't say that with pride. I say it with humility because I still, in my job description, request it to my organization. I will not just coach and mentor if I can still not do it. And that's why I was up to 1:30 in the morning and all this, because I'm still trying to commit to being a practitioner. And with that, all these things that you're sharing are very vital. But I just want to say, I really believe it's possible.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know you didn't say that,
Yep.
but it's hard. I'm not kidding. It is so hard. But it's being done, and I praise God for that. So I just want to encourage, but also say, yes, we have to absolutely strive for excellence.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end of the day, I've stopped trying to figure out what the terms are. I'm just doing it and surrounding myself around people who can speak into my life, who can challenge us. some of it's good, some of it's bad. That's where God really brings right people at the right time. But I just end by saying I really, in my heart, know you can absolutely integrate them both.
Yes.
Intricately, not just in the workplace, but the model you suggested, going into a place where no church established, completely unreached. God has blessed us because that's where we are. And all these challenges you said, we've been facing for 15 years. So it's possible by God's grace.
Yes. You have to know the nature of the battle and then enter into it. And you learn as you fight. You learn as you go. I can guarantee you that mistakes as you start a business are much less dangerous than the mistakes of the poor politicians I'm working with. Because when they make them, they always make them at a national level. And they do make them, but they're getting better. Okay, how do we step off, Mark? Just keep going, okay? Let's just keep going. Let's talk about where you are in this, or where you want to be, or what you want to do. Let's bring it down to you particular, assuming that your scenario will help others with their scenario. So what is it you're wanting to do, and how could we help you with more clarity? Yes?
Well, as we've talked before about this, and I've talked with Landra before about this, about knowing really about what God's calling you to, and whether you're going to be a catalyst in a particular place, or whether you're going to, how long term and what exactly God's calling you to in a particular place. And then if you are thinking about long-term transformation in a place, I'm talking about economic transformation, but also bringing the hope with you of Christ, then just to help people think through what that might look like. Some people may be called just to go in, be a catalyst, maybe to raise up the body, to maybe even plant a church if there's no church. And others may be called to, as you said yesterday, emigrate to a place and really establish long-term. So I found it really helpful to think about that before with you, and just wondered if you could help us.
Well, we know because God is who he says he is, that 45 degrees here is 45 degrees in infinity. In fact, we could get to the moon if we didn't know that. Sorry. Okay? So what you need to understand is the entire kingdom is like that. Whether it's micro or macro, it's the same set of values. Whether it's short-term or long-term, the values of the kingdom stay the same. So whether you're reproducing one church and one business in 1 year, the values that you use, that you want to leave behind, are exactly the same as if you were going to do the whole country. I'm going to put infinity here. Until Jesus comes back. Okay? But it's not going to have the same depth. So the key is to be like Jesus. If you're like Jesus in your value system, whatever you do, short-term, long-term, will be built on the same understanding. It lasting longer won't make it better. It being shorter won't make a bad model good. So the key to integration, which is a great word Matt used, is that you are integrated. You are as a person. The kingdom as it relates to finance and to material goods. The kingdom as it relates to health. That doesn't mean you're a medical doctor. It means you understand God's perspective on your physical body. You understand the place of prayer. You understand the place of medicine. And you give them both credence. If you're anti-medicine and all you can do is pray if you get sick, you're not biblical. You'd make a better Buddhist. If it's just inshallah, it doesn't matter what I do, my health will go whatever the direction, then you're a very good Muslim, but you're not a very good Christian. So the better you know God and His values, which is why I focus on rewiring your brain, no matter what you're going to do, then the better your model, short-term, long-term, will be. If we were more like Jesus, then the difference between what we do here and here wouldn't make so much difference. But to the measure we are not like Jesus, the farther out you go, the bigger your company, the more people you're reaching, the larger your mistakes are, the more damaging they are. Now, the fact is, no matter what we do for God, we're going to make mistakes. A brain surgeon is going to make a poor judgment on a given day, and somebody's going to die. We're just not perfect. But the key is to know that and to keep trying to rewire our brain. So whether what we're doing here or here, we understand it's the same values. It's just a bigger platform. It's a larger stage. So if I don't want to start one business, I want a global franchise. Okay, the big challenge is to make sure that a McDonald's hamburger tastes like a McDonald's hamburger anywhere in the world. That a Coca-Cola tastes like a Coca-Cola anywhere in the world. And they spend an enormous amount of time in that, it's quality control at the local level. I don't know what it is at the international level, making sure that the values that McDonald's works on and the hamburger they produce is the same. Okay, that's your challenge. When you've just got one hamburger store, you can change every day if you want to. You can be the hamburger store that never serves the same hamburger twice. So really, you have to think, I mean, from my perspective, you have to think eternity in me. And then whatever you reproduce will have that same DNA. It can't not. Does that help? Okay.
I hope I can articulate this.
We'll give you several chances.
Yeah. Kind of going back on that other thing. I guess what was rocking me from yesterday was I still know I'm blind. I still see that I see everything from my religious lenses.
Yep.
And what the fear I would have is what Matt's talking about, blending these. Because I know I'm blind, because I see things from these lenses, I don't want to, I think if I cross the line and go too far, encouraging or counseling or coaching a businessman where I give him just my paradigms and my goals, where, okay, God has a desire for business and how to do business with all the values. And then we have church planning and missions is here with different values and different...
Same values, different objective.
Okay, different objective. But it's where this side is imposing too much on this side, saying, well, this is how you have to do it.
Well, yes.
That's I mean, where it's gray to me is to what point to what point am I imposing too much of my objectives on the business where now I messed up God's intentions for business?
Yeah.
That's where I'm.
Well, part of that is, I'm not sure it's objectives, it's style. Okay, you have a competition between values and application. Values never change, they're absolute. Applications are dynamic, they have to change to fit the circumstances of the culture. When you go in, these same guys that were in the Indonesian tribes who were going to empower financially the Christians, and I said, you're going to get them killed. They said, you know, it's so hard. We go in with a great business idea that's really workable there, and the people are just not interested. Okay, well, yeah, of course they're not, because it's not anything they need, you know. So these quilts are lovely, and those gals are great to have a job. But as soon as the gal that has the outside connection of people in other countries that want quilts, how wonderful if she could somehow transfer that to clothing or cloth goods that are needed in Indonesia. Then she's got one of the top 10 markets in the world at their doorstep. Indonesia is a very wealthy country. It just hasn't trickled down yet. Okay? So she's got great values, but she also has the application. She's not teaching them to think in terms of creating within their own market something. Now, is that bad? Probably not for the 5 women she's working with, but if she was planning to multiply this across Indonesia as a major strategy for employment and empowerment, yeah, it's really bad. Because our thinking is you make money in the first world. And then you help people in the third world. If you want to eliminate poverty, you've got to begin thinking, what do the poor need? And how can I make that available to them while creating jobs? And this is Tata's genius. And he's doing it at a mega level with cell phones and cars. Not what do they need in the first world that I can make and make a lot of money and help poor people in India. What do poor people in India need that I can make a lot of money on and provide at the level they can afford? Now that is a kingdom strategy, whether he knows it or not. Because it empowers them not just with jobs and money, it empowers them to realize they are the future market of the world. The wealthiest man in India is telling the poorest people in India, you're the future. I'm going to plan my whole business strategy around you. Do you know how mind-changing that is? Gandhi started this. Indira Gandhi started it with the Buy India. You know, you can't import. She said if Indians want it, Indians can make it. And all their products in the beginning were really bad. But they got better. And she blocked MTV, and they had, what's theirs called? They have their own. Yeah, so they had their own. Within 3 years, their pop music channel was better than MTV is. Well, it wasn't too good the first year. Do you know what it's called? Huh? Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what the Indians can do. Who knew? See, so, yeah, the less you can give them this, and the more you can stimulate them to think this way, the less you're a colonialist and the more you are a nation builder. Because colonialism, when benevolent, even when benevolent, came in and gave them a system. Said, now just do this. And as soon as they left, it fell apart. Because it wasn't a system that was birthed out of their culture. It was something foreign.
Can I throw another
Yep.
example? This just kind of stirs me. There are some companies in the West where they're using, I'll say, a chaplain system, but some of them are totally against that word because that's also religious fear. They're saying it's an HR department where they...
Human resources?
Yeah, but basically what that human resources is, he's a pastor, but he doesn't have to be a pastor, but his main concern is for the employees, for their physical and spiritual health. So they're doing marriage counseling, but they're not saying, oh, you have to pray this prayer in order to get this marriage counseling, or whatever the issue is. This HR person or pastor or whatever you want to kind of...
Stick with HR, please.
Yeah. His responsibility is for 100 employees. Say there's several thousand. I know a few companies. They have a group of people, and that's what they're doing. They're praying if the people want to be prayed for, but they're not forcing that on them.
Yeah.
So my question would be, okay, if we're in a unreached place and we have this model that is totally different as a business concept, because they don't really have HR department. So in one sense, you're adding that value. You're saying we value our employees.
Well, you're doing it a classic Westerner way, see, and this wouldn't be a classic Jesus way.
Okay.
You're trying to create a department for life, a department for life. Okay, now over here will be human, and we'll research the human part, and over here we'll do the work. That is classically Western, to be able to think in compartments like that. Okay, I have a human problem, I'll go down the hall to a department. It works for us, because it is our culture to compartmentalize. But I don't think you want to take that compartmentalization of life into some of the cultures that are more integrated than we are, and would work life issues into the everyday somehow without having a person who's responsible for life issues. Now that's going to be very hard for you to do because you're a Westerner. It's going to be easier for some of the others of you who are not so Western. But is it wrong? No. Is it a good strategy for everywhere? No. Does it have dangers? Yes, all strategies do. All applications do. That's why this is situational. This is universal. I don't know, in a company of 30 people, I don't see how you can have a human resources department. If you have a company of 10,000 people, but it doesn't sound to me like for many of you guys that's your objective. You want to talk about some of your objectives? I wanna. Up here in the front.
Well, I'll talk about mine. It doesn't sound very spiritual at all.
What a relief.
I just want to help ministries, I guess based on the skills that I believe God has given me, I don't fancy myself a preacher or a worship leader. I'm just willing to help people solve financial problems, people set up accounting or bookkeeping systems, keep track of the money either they're earning or they're being given, and that's not really very holy or sacred or...
Oh, it is. See, that's the point. You guys just don't get it. You're not integrated. That's why you have to keep coming up with new names to call yourselves, to try to figure out what you are. Accounting is godly. Accountability is a biblical value. That I am responsible to other people for the resources that I have. That's a biblical value. That unless I am able to be accountable for the small I do have, I will never be trusted with a greater amount. These are all biblical values. You don't make that biblical, it already is.
In the midst of it, I feel that I can train, because I don't want to make me the answer to their problems. I want to help that agency, that mission, that whoever they are. I want to help train their people, whether they're nationals, whether they're Westerners, for them to be able to do it and to do it well. And I exit and go to the next situation.
Great.
And I believe strongly in cross-training so that in their agency or mission, there's more than one person that ideally that can do it, so that should something happen, it continues and it doesn't fall apart.
When you go into a Christian agency, one of your goals should be to help them realize God is in accountancy. See, it's 20 years on. My biggest challenge in the University of the Nations was convince my school leaders God actually was involved in photography. They kept trying to figure out, how do we get him in there? How do we get him in there? And they do it by doing a little religious worship before they studied what God has nothing to do with. They had no wonderment of the God of light, no wonderment of the God of contrasts, the God of design. You see, photography is a revelation of who God is and how He has created. So the challenge for the Christians is to realize that. You're not going to the accountancy department and doing secular work, and all the other guys are out on the field doing the really spiritual work. The fact is, if we didn't have the book of Numbers, Israel never would have made it out of the wilderness. God counts, and He counts everything. And He records everything. Why? Because building a nation is a quantifiable task. When you go to the non-Christians, you're teaching them a set of values. And you could say, these come from the Bible, but these are also the way all the successful countries in the world work.